Yo, 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 welcome back to the live show. It's good to be with you on Tuesday after Memorial Day. We had a little filler show yesterday, but we are back for the real thing today. It's good to be with you. Today we're going to get started into, like I mentioned yesterday, and it's not, I said yesterday it was St. Teresa of Avila talking about the different temptations in the early parts of the spiritual life. And that's not true. It's not just her. I don't know if every time I'm quoting them or something I'll mention who it is, but there's also Saint Bernard of Clairvaux is pretty involved in this section as well. A lot of this I'm taking from Ralph Martin's book, Fulfillment of All Desire. It's a good one. He an amazing book. He kind of just compiles all this stuff from some of the great doctors and saints of the church. So I'm going through that. Anything I feel like is helpful or things that I don't see being talked about in the Catholic space, I'm going to bring them out of there. So that's what we're talking about. And I'm going to talk about a little bit, hopefully, retirement at the end of this. I want to start getting into that stuff too. I don't know how you guys feel about me combining a bunch of subjects into one episode, but for now, we're going to do that. Because I don't know. I don't like sitting on stuff. Once I have it in my head, I just want to say it out loud. Say it out loud just to see how it feels. So we'll do that. Anything else? There's some stuff going on in the world today. Nothing too crazy. I do want to say now, before it happens, I really hope people don't fall for any sort of virus thing that happens later on. Well, I think they dropped the Hanta or I don't know how you pronounce that, but the Hanta virus thing, it seems like it's been dropped from the news a little bit. And then there's also the Ebola thing. Well, it's funny because most people will be like, oh, Hanta was a fake thing, but Ebola is real. And we can talk about at a later date if that ends up being a real thing. But just don't fall for that stuff. I was really proud to see a lot of people immediately when this stuff started showing up in the news being like, PSYOP. Which, it's a more complicated issue. But I do think it's a PSYOP. Even if it was a real disease, I would say it was a PSYOP to control. But anyway, we don't have to get into that. And then the Iran war thing, I've already heard people, and I don't talk to a lot of people, so I've heard mention of people saying, whether online or in person, oh, the war is coming to an end. It's like, guys, you don't understand what's going on. All this stuff, ceasefire, no ceasefire, even if it works, which I don't think it will, but even if it comes into play, like I kind of mentioned yesterday, a ceasefire doesn't mean anything. There are still objectives of all of the countries involved that none of them have been fulfilled. Even for Iran, who you could argue had a huge win in this current conflict with the Strait of Hormuz. Even they haven't got what they wanted yet. So no one has gotten what they wanted. Do you think they're just going to stop, in the middle of all the struggle? Absolutely not. So that's the big stuff in the news. Anything else? I don't think so. So let's get into it. So I'm talking about mistakes or temptations, not mistakes, temptations in the spiritual life, especially in the early stages. And so what does this mean? What stage am I talking about exactly? I'm talking about right when you have achieved some sort of mastery or victory over mortal sin. You are not regularly committing mortal sin. For guys, this is often going to look at lust in the current age. And also probably for women too. Got to get that stuff under control. I've heard some percentages, and I was talking with a friend of mine the other day. She said 72, which sounds more reasonable. It sounds more right. I had heard 90% or 92%, I can't remember, of men of, I think it was 18 plus, but it might have been 18 to 50 or something, watch pornography. So that's going to be one of your big mortal sins that you're going to have to, all the mortal sin tied around that subject. And I should have thought about more for women. What would that be? Even though women are watching pornography, unfortunately, at a higher rate today as well. Obviously, these things are very new. the internet and all that stuff. But anyway, this is after you have achieved, because that's crucial in the spiritual life. You have to defeat, destroy, alleviate mortal sin in your life. And you're starting to have a steady prayer life, steady in the use, participation of the sacraments, things like that. And then trying to grow in virtue. And then you're going to hit these temptations. So I'm going to cover them as I see that they're important to cover. So the first one I want to address is called by St. Teresa of Avila and Bernard of Clairvaux. It's interesting. People talk about they use the same phrase, but it's called indiscreet zeal. Indiscreet zeal. And zeal, hopefully you know what that is, but it's like a certain passion or fire for the Lord. So an indiscreet zeal. Ralph Martin used the term. Let me look at this. He used the term immature zeal. I didn't like that. I like indiscreet zeal because zeal is good, but if indiscreet, you're using it at inappropriate times or in inappropriate situations. Immature is like the zeal. I mean, I guess it would work too. Immature. I liked indiscreet better, and the saints used it. But either way, immature or indiscreet zeal. So what does this mean? What is this? How do they talk about this? So it's interesting. Saint Teresa of Avila and Bernard of Clairvaux, they both talk about this in the sense of doing good things, but too much or at the wrong place at the wrong time. So specifically, they're both going to talk about prayer and fasting as examples. That's not just, doesn't mean just these things are how you could be tempted to have indiscreet zeal, but these are common, I guess, that they saw. And I see this too. So with prayer, obviously, when you're growing in the spiritual life, your prayer life is going to increase. You're going to pray more. But then they say the temptation is that you're going to be tempted to, and this is kind of wild, be tempted to pray too much, which we should be praying all the time, but there's definitely specific parts of the day, like I've covered, like with St. Francis of Sales, that you should be specifically praying during the day. But they talk about how, like, if you're a mother of 7 and you're spending 5 hours in deep mental contemplative prayer, you have probably been tempted to indiscreet zeal. You like your children need you, your household is a mess, and you're like, well, I need to pray. It's like, no. St. Francis of Sales told you to pray an hour in early morning, preferably before your kids are even up. You don't need to be praying 5 hours in the day. That's an example of indiscreet zeal with prayer. And then this goes into everything. They even talk about it with monks, right? Some monks are not ready to be a hermit, but then they'll think they are, and they won't get counsel from the appropriate spiritual masters, and they'll try to do that, and it will break them. They'll try to, live under a rock for 16 hours a day by themselves, and it will actually break them. They're not ready for it. Not that that's a bad thing of itself. That's actually a really good and blessed thing. I think of St. Anthony of the Desert. But some people aren't ready for it, and they try to, whether out of pride, arrogance, they try to do that on their own before the time, before they're ready, or if it's just not their vocation. And then the other example they used, which I really like, was fasting. So fasting obviously is a good thing, and we should fast. And it's an easy, beautiful example from Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. He says, well, if you have duties and you're fasting so much that you're like too weak to do the duties assigned to you, whether you're like a doorman or you're a manual laborer or whatever it happens to be, then you have indiscreet zeal. You are zealous for the Lord, but you're indiscreet about it. You're immature about it. You're taking on more than God has given you the grace to do at this time. And so people immediately people on the other side, they try to be like, oh yes, we're all fasting too much. It's like, no. You're probably not fasting too much, but you also have outer limits too. You have the minimum limits, but you also have the outer limits. And when you're first, this is mostly for people when they're first converting, or for people that are very advanced, but not for most of these in-betweeners, which if you've been Catholic for a while, you might be an in-betweener. But when you initially convert and you break mortal sin, you might be tempted to do this, and you might gas yourself out. And I've seen this, and I will say for myself, I've seen this as a temptation for me, indiscreet zeal. Not really with the fasting, because I was practicing fasting before I kind of became Catholic. So, but with the prayer, definitely. And even like thinking I need to pray more. We should always be praying, but praying in a specific focused way. I'm going to stop saying that because you probably get it by now. So How does indiscreet zeal come about? I this is not Saint Teresa and Saint Bernard. I've kind of said their piece because they didn't really talk about how it comes about. For me, I think it was seeing the lukewarmness of a lot of, because like especially when you're a convert and people talk about this, when you convert, usually you kind of know you have to know a lot. You're reading a lot, you're studying a lot. So you honestly may know more than people that have been Catholic their whole life or something like that. So then the temptation comes is when you see the lukewarmness of people when you come into the faith is like, oh, I'm better than them. I know more than them and stuff. And even you might know more than them, but that can be used as a temptation to be like, well, I'm just going to go off and they don't even know what they're doing. And I saw that with myself, maybe still see that with myself. It's like, well, I'm just going to go 100% gas pedal, unlike these lukewarm people. And that's a temptation. We need to like not be comparing ourselves to other people. Honestly, maybe that's not true. Because some people talk about you can be comparing yourself to the great saints trying to achieve more. But we won't talk about that now. So yeah, I can see how that temptation can creep up on people, for sure. And then also another way I can see it is when we look at our past sins, we can kind of want to get on ourselves almost in a repentant way, but like all this evil I've done, I need to expiate it. I need to atone for it. And then we take on too much too soon. Not saying that, we can build up to those things or depending on our state in life, participate in those things. Because I do think we're way too soft nowadays with the fasting and prayer and stuff like that. But there is a point where you can go too far depending on where you're at in the spiritual life. And we need to be attentive to that. So that is indiscreet zeal. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. Let me think real quick. Yeah, so just be on the lookout for that. And what's going to kind of be tied to this is if you find yourself judging people a lot, at mass or around or in prayer and different things, because you shouldn't be doing that. When you're praying, you should be talking to God. You should be praying, interceding for other people. You shouldn't be judging them and being down on them and being they should do more. Maybe they should do more, but it doesn't need to be. We don't need to be judging them the whole time at all. So if you see that, I know with myself, I saw that and I was like, this is a sign of indiscreet zeal. It's like my zeal needs to be directed at like my own virtue, my own life. It doesn't need to be directed at like mentally yelling at other people all the time, even if they are doing wrong. I don't want to frame it that people are sometimes not doing wrong things because they could be. It's just not my business or your business probably to be addressing those things, unless obviously you're a parent or a spiritual leader to this person. But that is rarely the case. So indiscreet zeal. Hopefully covered all that. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. I do want to slide real quick into retirement. I do want to talk about this subject, but I want to start it off with the more of an esoteric explanation. So retirement, for me, I define it, retirement, when I'm saying that word, is the idea in America and probably in other places where you're going to work for like your whole prime of your life so that you have a bunch of money so you don't have to work and make money at the later part of your life. And there's a point in that where I disagree and a point where I can understand where I don't necessarily disagree. So I want to explain that. So I think it's okay to work for, the prime of your life and have some money saved up and maybe use that for later in life for security purposes. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't like that, but I don't necessarily think it's wrong. And but the way I would see it is that if you're retiring from that job, it's because you want to pursue something else that will benefit society. And maybe now you don't need the money that it offered you, but you're not going to just like bow out of your responsibilities to your family, to the community, to your culture, to your country, to the church, to the world, etc. So I want to be clear about that because people get very frustrated and it is very nuanced. But I think if your plan is to like 40, 50 years in your prime and then have a bunch of money saved up so you can just like live like La Vida Loca, partying all the time, golfing all the time, I think that's terrible and you should not do that. And I think you could argue that's even wrong to do that. And it would put your soul, I think, in a ton of risk of damnation. When you're older like that, that's really the time to like bear down and be preparing for death. Not that you should not be prepared for death the whole time, but that's like, it's around the corner. And it's not the time to like throw virtue to the wind and throw generosity and all these different things to the wind. So that's what I mean by those kind of those shades of retirement. But I think retirement in general is kind of a twisted idea. And so why is that? So retirement is the idea that you are going to take the present and how would I say this? I don't want to say destroy the present, but you're going to like sacrifice the present for the future. Which sounds is there another way to put that? I think I'll roll with that for now. Which sounds good and stuff, but I'm not talking about like you want to be planning the future to a certain extent, but like you only have the present. And I'm not saying this in like a hedonistic way where you're like, oh, we're just going to enjoy now. No, no, I'm saying we want virtue now. We want generosity now. We want liberality now. We want to be holy now. We don't want to, and we want to be happy now too. We don't want to be happy in some unknown older age that probably won't happen the way you think it's going to happen and might not happen at all. So that's what I mean. So let's kind of walk through this. So a lot of people's idea is like I'm going to work if I'm 25 years old, I'm planning on working for the next 30 years of my life. Like it's going to be rough. I'm going to be working a lot, working overtime. I'm putting all of my current money into like retirement funds and different things. And I'm not going to enjoy it now. And I'm not going to be generous now. And even I think of this a lot with like projects. People don't take risks because they're like, I'll risk it later. Like travel is a kind of a risk. It's also a pleasure thing. I won't travel now. I'm not pro travel or anything, but just an example. I won't travel now. I'll travel when I have this huge amount of money in these retirement funds. I'll travel when I'm 60, 70. And that is jacked up, I think, for a lot of reasons. It's like, why wait until then to do that project, to take that risk for the Lord, for a business, for your family, to do the great thing? Oh, I have this idea to start this community that will help a bunch of people with their spiritual lives or with their health, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm going to wait until I have a bunch of money when I'm 60. It's like, but I have the money now, but I'll have more security then. It's like, I think that's a trap. It's like, you need to do that now. You might not be able to do it when you're 60, when you're 70. Who knows? Or I want to do this thing with my kid when he's 20, but it would be better when he's 40 and I have security and I have all this. You will not be the type of, you don't know if you'll have that time. And you won't be the type of person that will take risks if you haven't taken a risk for 30, 40 years. And also, it's like, when is the time for action? Is the time for action when you're 20, 30, 40? Or is the time of action when you're 60, 70, 80? Do you think you're going to have the vital energies to take a risk that will take a lot of just vitality? You think you're going to be more likely to take that risk at 60, 70, 80? I don't think so. So it's basically just deferring all goodness, virtue, except for, I guess, the virtue of like, I was going to say pragmatism, but hard work, I guess, work ethic. You're saving all of that virtue till later. It's like, no, 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 be generous now with your possessions, with your money, with your time. Be generous with that now. And then when you're older, whether you have security or not, you'll be the type of person that can do that because you've been building up that virtue for 20, 30, 40 years. So really, that's why I'm against the whole retirement thing. And I encourage people, people might be mad about this. I encourage people to not save up for retirement. I encourage them to save up for some project or some mission that they have in mind that God has given them, or even for something just beautiful and amazing. Like a cool thing, if like you have a lot of money in the background and you're like, I don't really need it, pay for like a beautiful church, pay for beautiful art, pay for a beautiful, I don't even know, I don't have a lot of ideas with this, but a community center, a business, different things like that, or charity. And don't, and this is going to be a side tangent. I'm really disenfranchised with charities in terms of like these big charity organizations. I'm sure there's some good ones out there. But anyway, saving up your money for charities, different things like that. Hopefully, you doing the specific charity, not just giving the money away, you using the money to do something charitable for other people. I think that's how the Christian should live. I don't think we should be pushing this off to another time. And I think there's a lot of factors that have come into creating this. I think the advancement of healthcare technology is a huge one, where it's like people are like, well, I'll be able to live like 30 years more in my old age but it's going to be expensive and I need the money to pay for all that health insurance and different things. Even though we have like Medicaid and stuff now, I know it just got cut, but that's besides the point. um, so that's one factor. And then another factor is that the breakdown of the family. Before, you would be taken care of by your children. Now people have like one or two children, even Catholics, a lot of times one or two children. And that one child is not really close to their family. Obviously, that's not the case all the time. But the plan is not really to take care of your parents. So if the parents have that understanding, they're not going to rely on that. So involved in this is like obviously rebuilding the family is going to help a lot of things. Reestablishing those traditions of children taking care of their parents, their grandparents, different things like that. And maybe also, and this is more controversial, is understanding that you don't need or are going to opt out of these complicated, expensive healthcare practices when you're older. Because these really imprison you. The idea that you're going to be kept alive by machines for another 10, 15 years, or kept alive by pills or surgeries for another 10, 15 years when you're older, at the expense of, thousands, possibly millions of dollars. If you abandon that, I think it could really free you to do a lot of things in this life. And I'm not saying you won't have pain and suffering. I'm saying you'll probably have more pain and suffering, but you'll have a more full life. Obviously, I'm speaking in generalities. I'm not speaking in specifics. So each thing is going to have to apply to your own situation. But I think generally we need to reject retirement. And then there's financial reasons too with retirement accounts and stuff. I'm not going to get into that. But try this out. I would say try thinking about this. Like, what would my life look like if I don't plan on retiring? Not that you don't stop working the current job you're in or something like that, but you don't plan on just like sitting around and just doing whatever you want at a certain age. You can still save up money and all that stuff. There's different rules for that, I think, but I'm not going to talk about that now. I think that's the less important part of this conversation. But I think the mindset and the virtue building is more important. So I would really take a step back. And I've seen people talk about this. This is really cool, where they've made drastic life decisions. I'm one of those people that made drastic life decisions where they're like, if I'm going to start thinking like retirement is not the thing, the like I'm going to golf for the last 40 years of my life is no longer on the table. How am I going to live my life? And see how that strikes you. Yeah. I think I'm going to stop there. Let's see what time. We've been going for a while. I do want to cover one more thing. It's just real quick. Not in the show notes, but James Fishback, that politician or the guy running for governor of Florida I was talking about last week, I believe, he just got married. And so congratulations to him and everything. Catholic man, which is awesome. But I don't want to talk about that. But I want to talk about the fact that people were getting on his case because apparently he hasn't known his now wife for very long. And I'm like, I don't know who these people were getting on his case were, but if they're Catholics or Christians, I'm like, bro, just get out of here. Get out of town. Because I think this is great. It sounded like he knew her for maybe less than 6 months before they got engaged and married, possibly. The time frame wasn't really certain from what I was reading. But I think that is the way to go. And I talk to a lot of people about this, whether I'm trying to date someone or just, I think this is a topic Catholics like to talk about in general. It's like, oh, how long should you date? How long until you get engaged, married? I don't think there's a fixed rule, but at the same time, I'm saying that there's not a fixed rule. I'm going to say like, honestly, I don't think you need 6 months to know that this person is right for you. Honestly, for me, I've known pretty much every single time, even relationships that have gone longer than 6 months, I've known within the first 2 months, 3 months that I'm like, okay, this person is great and is a good fit for me, or this person is not good. So I really encourage the short dating, but the short dating means you got to be asking the crucial questions, not like like a lot of people. They're like, oh, like what's your favorite ice cream and stuff like that. It's like no, no, no. You need to cut if you really want to get to know someone. You got to cut to the chase, the real stuff. Obviously, the laws of the church, the laws of God, how they feel about those things, getting to know their virtues, their vices, um, how they feel about children, being a wife, being a husband, stuff like that. But I just wanted to real quick because yeah, it is like you don't need to date that long. You'd still need to make sure that they're a good fit for you, and that's intensive. That's not casual. You can't just sit back and have fun for 6 months. You got to have the real conversations. But at the same time, if you're doing that, it shouldn't take longer, I don't think, than that. And then don't even get me started on like the time it takes from engagement to marriage because the Catholic Church has all these time limits now, which I understand, I think, but at the same time, I think it's a little bureaucratic, but it is what it is, and it's the law of the church right now. So got to go with it. So that's what I have on that. Hopefully that's helpful. And let me know if you disagree. There's one guy that disagreed. He still hasn't responded about something else. Anyway, that's all I got for today. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think about the show. That's all I got. God bless you. God be with you. And I will see you on the next episode.